All right, EntreArchitect community, it's 4 p.m. Eastern, which means it's time for the EntreArchitect Context and Clarity live conversation for Thursday, August 4th, 2022. Thanks for joining us today. As you get here, say hi. Let us know that you're here and let us know where here is for you. Where are you joining this conversation from? It's great to have you here. Great to have all of our community joining us today. If we've never met before, my name is Jeff. I'm in Indianapolis. I come here every weekday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern for one reason, so that we can find clarity around the things that matter most to you, the architect. Doesn't matter if you're the employee of a firm or you own your own firm. Maybe you've circled a date on the calendar. You said 2022 is my year and you're on the runway to starting your own thing. Or maybe you have owned your own firm for a year or 10 years or 17 years and you're starting to rethink or reimagine what that firm could or maybe even should be. All of the topics that we cover, one topic every day, they all fall under the broad umbrella of the business of architecture, and they're all the need to know topics for the success of small firm architects just like you. So thanks for joining us today. As usual on these Thursdays, I am joined by my co-host, Katharine MacPhail. Hi, Katharine.
Hello, Jeff.
Where are you today, Katharine? Massachusetts.
I am in my my new office, which turns out is the worst room in the house to have an office. So it's very hot in here. I am going to be looking hot again today. Sorry.
Okay. Well,
Yep.
you should maybe you could do a little architectural work on that office, on
Yeah,
that house
I've
there.
already designed the changes. It's just a matter of getting anybody to come do them.
That sounds like a conversation a lot of our audience will have with their own clients.
Yep, I have it myself.
Absolutely. Yep. We're all in that boat, I think. Looks like to me on my screen that Chris Novelli is the first in. He's in Massachusetts. So Chris, welcome. Glad that you're here. You being first in means that you're the winner of today's John Kinney Memorial Crochet Bathtub Award for the first person into the conversation. So welcome. See, Jefferson from Los Angeles is joining us on LinkedIn. Kurt's joining us over from the Twitch verse from Flint, Michigan. Glad you're joining us today, Kurt. Christian from Ithaca, Jessica from LA, John from Connecticut, Swelterport. He says, yeah, it is hot across a lot of the United States. Scott's joining us from hazy San Francisco. Let's see. And David Phillips, welcome. Happy Thursday to you from YouTube. Glad you're here as well. Rod has joined us also from Monroe, Louisiana. Glad you're joining us today as well, Rod. If you are commenting right now, if you're on Facebook and you're commenting away and you're going, hey, why aren't my comments showing up on the screen like Yoko's is or like John Jones's is, it's because you're in a private Facebook group. You're either in the EntreArchitect Community Facebook group or you're in the Architects and Allies Facebook group. Both of those are private groups. Facebook has some rules that says your name, your likeness, your comments can't leave that group unless you give permission. So if you're commenting away, they're not showing up, you need to give permission. So there's a URL at the bottom left of your screen right now, chat.restream.io/FB, as in Facebook. If you type that into your browser window there, you can, with just a couple of clicks, you can give Facebook permission to connect with Restream, which is this platform that we use for Context and Clarity Live. And that'll solve all of your problems, every single one of them. Even
All
if
of
you're
them.
just really super hot in your office, that'll solve your problems. So check that out, chat.restream.io/FB if you're having a problem from the Facebook side. Great to see so many familiar names. Great to have all of you joining us here today. Luciana, hi, Luciana, welcome back from Massachusetts. Nicole says Arizona's in the house, mainly because the house has air conditioning. I'll bet that's the case. Glad you're joining us from Arizona today, Nicole. Everybody else, our guest today has I think he's got a fan club. I think he's got a fan club inside the EntreArchitect community. As usual, we have spent the week preparing for this conversation. We try to, if you're not familiar, if you're new to Context and Clarity, first of all, welcome. Glad that you're here. We actually do this every day. We do this every weekday. We have what we call our context and clarity conversations that lead up to our context and clarity live. So we take our guest on Thursdays for context and clarity live, what we'll talk with them about, and we shape our entire week around that. So all week we've been talking about finding better clients and better projects and better fees, or winning better fees. We've been talking about the possibility of a coming recession, or maybe there's one here now. We've talked about a filtration system for our prospects, all leading up to, in some way or another, today's conversation. So we're going to jump into this here in just a minute. I want to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Am I on track right now, Katharine?
Yeah, I think you are.
I haven't made any giant blunders yet.
No, we're only a few minutes in, so
Yeah, give him time. He'll mess something up. Yeah. Fair enough. Diego's joining us today. Welcome back, Diego. Glad you're here as well from south of the U.S. border there. And Chris has the benefits of working from home during the summer. The afternoon swim with the kids. All right, now he's just trying to make us jealous.
I know. It's like the sweater last week. Yeah. Last week, Scott was talking about his sweater, which we didn't need to hear. Now we got Chris.
Now Chris is at the pool.
Swimming pool.
Hey, I'll tell you what. Yeah. If you can have these conversations from the pool, more power to you. I appreciate that. That's fantastic.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's jump into it here. Our guest today is a consultant and a champion for small firm architects. He's the design fee wizard that's not only conjuring better clients, better projects, and better fees, but he's also vanquishing scope creep. He's the founder of Blue Turtle Consulting, Ian Motley. Welcome to Context and Clarity Live.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's great to have you here. I mentioned the fact that I think you've got a fan club in the EntreArchitect community, and that really goes to the fact that you have been on the EntreArchitect podcast with Mark R. LePage twice already, and those are very, very popular episodes, both of them. And I think that really speaks to the fact that even though maybe all of our audience are sole practitioners, they own small firms, there's probably an employee or two that will join the conversation, but many of our audience are business owners, and we're all still trying to figure out, right? How do we win the clients that we want? Mm-hmm. How do we win the fees that we think we deserve? How do we get better at this? How do we make our businesses better? So I find it fascinating that your niche, if I can call it that, your focus is really on the fee proposal side of the equation, if I can say it that way. How did you get there?
How did I get there? That's a good question. 12 years ago, I used to work for quite a famous architect, and I wrote fee proposals for the firm. So that's essentially how it got started. Whilst working at that firm, writing the proposals, I met a young architect who is the partner of our firm now. And she said, it's really interesting the way you approach fee proposals. This value-based approach that you use is not something we're taught during our formal training. It's something she had never heard of before, despite going through the usual routes of becoming an architect. And also she was raised in an architectural practice. Her parents are architects. So she had 25, 30 plus years of architectural experience at that time, and said, I've never heard about this before. So we sat down, we talked about it, and she said, I think this would be very useful information to give to small to medium-sized firms. If you ever wanted to start a consultancy, let me know. So it took probably about 6, maybe even 12 months from the initial discussion to when we actually started the consultancy. But that was the catalyst behind it all.
Well, that's a really smart lady. You should keep her around.
She's been around for 12 years. Can't get rid of her.
That's good. That's a good thing. Yeah, that's something that we touch on a lot, because everything that we talk about in the world of EntreArchitect is really the business of architecture, which is as you identified, is a huge hole, I think, in architectural education. When you're talking about value-based, or when she was talking about, you're presenting this value-based approach, do you have any preferences in terms of, hey, it needs to be hourly, or it needs to be percentage of cost of construction, or do you have any rules about that, or are you taking a different route to what value based means in the way that you're approaching it?
Yeah, good question. So hourly rates, percentage, lump sum fees, they all have their pros and cons. So we need to understand what the pros and cons are so that we can apply them at the right time. So as an example, hourly rate fees reduce your risk significantly, because if you work on the project, you should, in theory, should be able to get paid at least a portion of that time, if not the whole time. But they also kind of limit your reward, because you've got to put in every hour to get every dollar back.
Right.
So there's a time and a place for hourly rates. So hourly rates are very good with situations where you don't have a clearly defined scope, and it would be too risky to put a lump sum or fixed rate proposal forward. Or they're good for periods in the project where it's not a set time, it's not a set deliverable, such as contract admin. That might be a good time to have an hourly or daily or weekly rate, because you don't have control over the construction typically, unless you're a design build architect. But typically you don't have control, so you don't know how long it's going to take. So in those situations, less risk and less reward, less risk, but it can be very suitable. But for other occasions, lump sum, fixed rate fees would be better, or percentage fees. Percentage fees are typically the best, but very hard to get. Very hard to get.
Right.
Yeah.
There can definitely be some resistance, to the percentage based. In listening, we talked about this before we went live. That's one of the ways that I like to prepare for these conversations, is I listen to a lot of interviews, and you have talked, and you have an article or two on your website as well, and some learning opportunities there, and you talked a good bit about tiered proposals, which there's a lot of folks in this community that are familiar with Blair Enns and Win Without Pitching manifesto. Blair Enns talks about tiered proposals as well. Maybe we can dip our toe into that. And for anybody that doesn't understand what a tiered proposal is and why you would put a tiered proposal together, can you explain that?
Yeah, this is the kind of the $1 million question, really. There's three main reasons. When we talk about tiered proposals, let's take a step back. Traditionally, the way to propose for design fees, and I say traditionally, let's go back 10 years, maybe 15 years, is that traditionally what you would do is define a scope with the client. So the client would say, hey, I want a new house, maybe 4,000 square foot, maybe 3-car garage, swimming pool, whatever they want. So you would define that scope with them. Then you go back to your office and you'd think, how long is this going to take for me to do? And you would have an estimate of your time. You might balance that with previously completed projects. You might balance it with the amount of work you have currently on the books. And then you'd say, well, I think this will probably take me about 6 months. So I'm going to put a fee in for the time to complete the work. And so your fee could be anything. And I'm not suggesting any fees here, but I've just used fees as an example so we can understand how it works. So you might put in a fee for, I don't know, 10%. That's a nice round number. Or you might put in a fee for $10,000, pounds, euros, whatever it is. Okay. Now, the problem is there's many problems here, but one of the problems is nobody really knows how much anything should cost. So when you give a client a proposal and it costs 10%, $10,000, 10,000 euros, whatever you price it to be, as a human being, as a client, when you get that proposal, you're not really sure if that's good or bad, because as human beings, we find it very challenging to understand prices when prices are in isolation. The only reason prices make sense is if we can compare them to something else, if we have a benchmark to measure them by. So inevitably, when you put your price on the table, you're essentially saying to your client, go and solicit other proposals, see what other people charge to do this work. And they go out, they go and do that. They get 2 or 3 other proposals, and then they measure yours or they judge your proposal based on the competition. And this is why we often refer to this pricing model as a cost-based model or a commodity pricing, because you're defining a scope and pricing it. Somebody else is defining the same scope, they're pricing it. And all of a sudden, if we're not careful, it's a race to the bottom. And the reason it's a race to the bottom is because the client doesn't understand the difference in design service providers. He thinks if you're hiring an architect, surely all architects do pretty much the same thing, right? You might have different portfolios, but if you're in a certain part of the world and you're talking to a certain level of architect, you'll probably find that the competing firms have a similar level of experience and a similar portfolio. So inevitably, price becomes the deciding factor. And this is the same for any purchasing decision. You could be buying anything. You could be buying accounting services. If you can't tell the difference between the accountants, they're all qualified, they all have experience, then ultimately you're going to probably use price to guide your decision. So coming back to your question of tiered pricing, how does tiered pricing work? In this situation, we realize that if we want to get away from this problem of the race to the bottom and being judged on price, then one of the ways we can do this is by not offering one price, but by offering 2 or even 3 different prices to choose from. Okay, so that's the theory. So tiered, we don't call it tiered because tiered sounds like it's a vertical thing. We call it kind of an options approach because it can be horizontal, it can be vertical, it can be a combination of the 2. But essentially, you're giving your clients different options for a different type of design service so that they don't just judge you on fee. Because if I gave you 3 options and I said, for example, to this same client, I'm no longer putting 10% on the table in isolation. I'm now going to put an 8% service on the table. I'm going to put a 10% service, and I'm going to put a 12% option for you. As a human being, when you get that choice, your immediate question is, why have I got 3 options here? What is the difference between these options? So you don't go immediately take it and compare it to the competition. The first port of call is, what is the difference? And that's how we're able to demonstrate value. And we can show them, well, if you do pay more, you actually get more. There's many ways to define what that more might be.
Right.
But that's why it's a value-based approach, because you're saying, don't judge me just on fee. Let's show you what spending more gets you. What are the benefits of doing that? So that's tiered pricing, essentially.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I know there are some in our community, in our audience that are already doing a tiered type approach. Before we went live, I told you I was in a mastermind group just directly before we logged on, and one of the people in that group talked about, I would say, very sophisticated clients, right? It's clients that they probably employ their own project managers, et cetera. And so the question that they had was, okay, I've got this client that's sophisticated. They have a lot of projects, and they basically give us a very tightly defined scope. And then the way, the conversation went, they give us this tightly defined scope, and then all they do is exactly as you described, they go to the bottom of the page, they look for the number, and they, this one was 10 versus 12 versus 8. So I'm gonna pick the 8, or however they decide to do it. Is there any way, or what's the best way to compete in that type of scenario?
Yeah, good question. So look, the first thing we need to understand is this the client we want to be working with? If they're purely driven by price, is that a market segment we want to be involved in? And typically, I think the scenario you're describing usually comes from a sort of an RFP, a request for proposal,
right.
That type of scenario where they're very specific. This is what we want you to tell us. And it won't just be the price. It'll be the people hours you have on the project, the resources you're using. You'll also have to demonstrate your experience and everything else. And so, you have to understand the rules of engagement. If price is the deciding factor, you then have to say to yourself as a business, okay, how do I compete on price? Could I outsource a chunk of my work? Could I automate things? Could I implement technology in a way that can make me more efficient? Because using the traditional kind of architectural service and competing on price, it's a very short-term game, because you can compete on price for a period of time, and then you'll either get burnt out, or somebody typically younger, more enthusiastic, perhaps even greener, will come along and they'll think, oh, I can do it for less than that. Sure, I can. But with experience, they'll realize, no, it takes a lot to deliver the service, and they perhaps didn't have enough in the fee. But that's typically what we see. So the question becomes, is this really a client you want to work with? And if it is, how are you going to compete on price? What are you going to do to your business system to make it more efficient?
That's one of the things that
I was going to say, probably not the answer people want to hear, but that's
that's one of the things I really appreciate about what you talk about, is that for some, you're probably challenging a mindset. As you described, this is 10 or 15 years ago. This is how proposals. We talked about this in the mastermind earlier. This is the way that I wrote proposals. This is the way that we learned. I learned from someone else that learned from someone else, and none of us had any business training, from architecture school. So I appreciate the fact that this does challenge a mindset. But one of the things that I also appreciate is that even with a sophisticated client, as was described in that mastermind group, I think it's also challenging their perspective, if not their mindset, the way that they're seeing the professional proposal come across to them. And when we talk about differentiation a lot, that seems to make a lot of sense to me.
The other thing to bear in mind is that any client will pay more if there are benefits to doing so. So as design professionals, one of the challenges for us is to communicate those benefits. And if we fail to communicate the benefits, then price becomes the deciding factor. And the challenge at the moment is most people that we work with tend to explain their benefits as being good listeners, is being perhaps award-winning, that type of arrangement. And the problem is, it's very hard to really demonstrate to a client that you listen more than your competition listens. Also, nowadays, a lot of design firms that we work with, in fact, we recently did a survey, and we found that the top ranking, Google ranking websites around all different cities around the world were all listing their award-winning capabilities as their kind of unique selling proposition. But obviously, it's not unique when 90% of people are using that as their byline. So this is the thing. We need to understand what the client really values, because if we can hit that, they will pay a premium for it because it offers benefits to them. But if we fail to hit that, and we simply talk in terms of aesthetics in the building, then it can be very challenging, and you will end up competing on fee, essentially.
So I think that's a really great point. I want to dig into that for just a second. So what are some real legitimate benefits? And one of the ways that I look at it is that I try to make the distinction is that I think the benefit has to come from the result of your work. There are plenty, we have this in our process and so on. But how, when you're working with clients, how do you help them think about the benefits that they offer for their clients?
Yeah, it's a process. We have to drag it out of them. We have to, examine the situation. We have to interview them. We have to really tease it out of them, because they're so close to the work. They don't always know exactly what the benefits are that they give their clients. So the other way of doing this is to look at the client type. and say, what are their main interests? What is going to get them excited? What's going to make them kind of roll their eyes, so to speak? And it depends on the client type, what's going to get them interested. So to give you some examples, let's say you're working with a commercial client. So the reason the commercial client is moving forward is because they want to make money. Now, most architects will ask them what they want. So they might say, I want a 68-unit hotel, 68-room hotel, or I've got 30 million this, or I've got to do that, or this, that, and the other. What we often overlook or forget to ask is why they want it. And the why is usually because they want to make money. So if I'm building a hotel, probably to make money. I'm building a condo building, probably to make money. If I'm going to do a tenant improvement on an existing building to put a restaurant in it, well, the restaurant is there to make money. So it really helps if we can speak in the vocabulary of our client and show them how we can help them make money. And it's even better if we can demonstrate past experience of helping other clients make money. Then, if we can do that, then the client's interested. Okay. Because 99% of the time, if I'm a developer, I'm not going to live in that project. In all honesty, I may not care how it looks, but if it makes me more money, then you've got my attention. And this is the challenge for architects, because we as design professionals, we see it from the other side of the table. We see the design. We're very interested in design. We notice textures. We notice colors, spaces, and things like that. Whereas a developer client would notice dollars and cents. And if they can't tell the difference between the design firms, everyone does great work. Everyone's got a great portfolio. Everyone's got a great story, great resume. Then one way to make more money is to take it away from the design team and negotiate them down. Now, that's a commercial client. A residential client is going to be very different. They're building for personal taste. They're perhaps trying to demonstrate their success in life. They're perhaps trying to raise a family. They might be empty nesters and just looking for a change of life. But they're much more emotionally driven on that journey. So saving them money or helping them make money, I'm sure they'd be interested. But getting what they want is really kind of where it works out. So once again, we don't want to just ask them what they want. We need to understand why they want it. And then we can do a much better job at communicating why they might want to spend a little bit more on the design.
Yeah, I love that. We have to actually understand our clients and their motivations. That's
the tricky part. It's the tricky part.
It is.
So Jessica had a question that I'm interested to hear the answer as well, of course. How do change orders, ad services, scope creep work with tiered value? If a client has chosen a mid-tier, improve themselves to have high-tier needs, does the whole fee get adjusted to the next tier, or is it straight up ad services agreements for each? I mean, I think a lot of us are afraid of fixed fees because we don't know if, even if it seems like the scope is very set, in my experience, most of the time it changes,
Okay, so that's quite a big question. Let me see if I can break that down a bit. So is it how do change orders, ad services work with tiered pricing?
Yeah, because if they go for the mid-tier price, but they're high-tier people and they're going to try to get high-tier service, then do you just keep adding the services they didn't sign up for in the mid-tier as like additional fees?
So it's interesting because most of what we deal with in our business is trying to understand human behavior and then trying to address it so we can communicate more effectively. So I'm going to use an analogy here. And if I don't hit the mark, just let me know and we can try and find another example. If I were an airline and I'm selling tickets to travel on my airplane, okay. If I just say to somebody, hey, you can come on our plane. Let's say it's LA to London Heathrow. It's going to cost you $3,000, okay, to have that trip, 10-hour trip. If I buy that ticket at $3,000, I get on the plane and I notice the seats at the front are bigger. They're more comfortable. They're more luxurious. There's more amenities there. But I wasn't given the choice. I just was given a ticket and I purchased that ticket. As a consumer, I'm thinking, well, this isn't fair. What's going on here? I committed to the airline. I paid them the money. I want to be up there. I want to be up the front where it's more comfortable, more enjoyable. However, if we change the psychology of it and we give the customer the option. You can actually have economy, you can have business, or you can have first class, but you get to choose. Economy is 3,000, business is going to be 6,000, first class might be 12,000. When you choose economy, your complete mindset has changed, because now when you get on the plane, you're like, yeah, it's comfortable, but I'm the one saving money, as you trot to the back of the plane and get in the economy seat. So psychologically, you're not now trying to get yourself up there into business class, because you made the decision, you chose to do that. So what we find with tiered pricing is when a client is offered certain things and they say, you know what, I don't value that, I don't think I need that, I'm going to buy the more affordable option. They do this because they're at the start of the journey. They haven't built anything yet, nothing's designed, they don't know what's happening, they're probably risk adverse. So they're probably going with the more affordable one because they can see the savings. Later on, however, they might decide that they want some of these additional services. Now, in the past, when you offered them one fee, psychologically speaking, they would say, well, you're my architect, you've got to provide this, and don't try and add anything on because I hired you. So you're my architect, let's do this. But because they chose the service, later on, when they decide they perhaps would like these additional items, instead of assuming that it's included in the price, they now know that they turned it down. It was offered to them. So the psychology of it changes, and they usually come forward and say, look, I didn't think I needed this 6 weeks ago when we started, but now I could see it be really beneficial. Is it still available? And if so, how much would it cost now? Now, because you had the information on the page from day one, you're not adding fees, essentially. You're just saying, oh, you'd like to upgrade to maybe the premium package or the middle package. Yeah, we can do that. We can upgrade you at that stage. That's no problem. But the fees are already there, so it's not a surprise. We don't have to go out and research numbers. So that's one way that scope creep is addressed. There are layers of ways to address scope creep problems, but that's just one of them, the kind of primary approach.
That actually resonates with me personally, because I used to work with somebody that you were talking about communication, right? And in the airline example, hey, there's one price. Well, what does that actually get me? I worked with somebody that I would say, and I'm not really trying to throw anybody under the bus, but not only were they not a great communicator, but they frankly, admittedly, did not want to be a great communicator. And so once a client was signed on, they would simply, and like I said, we had that traditional proposal, right? Here's what we heard you say. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the scope of our deliverables. Here's our cost. That's, letter format. That's really kind of the way our proposals were. And so we'd sign a project or a client on, and the client said, hey, I would like to add whatever, as you're describing.
Yeah.
And this person would say, yes, we can do that. It's clearly additional services, right? It wasn't included in the scope. It's additional services. They've asked to add it, but he'd add it and then invoice them later for additional services, which of course was a surprise because there was never a conversation for that. And 90 some odd % of these things ended up in some sort of conflict, legal or, whatever, which is a really bad situation. That's why that example that you're giving really resonates with me, because it's a form of communication that, and as you said it, hey, I know that was in that tier and I didn't think, or in that, in the matrix, or however they refer to it. I didn't think I needed it, but I think it would be really helpful now, right? They're already in that mindset of this is an ad.
Yeah.
And, we're still responsible for that clear communication. But I like that because I can think back to that period of time going, that would have been really helpful, because despite our worst efforts, it might have saved us in a lot of those instances.
Yeah, exactly. And also by giving people options, you're able to educate them. Oh, we do have a business class section. We do have a first class section. And there's power in being able to turn things down. Clients, would like to be able to be given the choice and choose and turn things down. So, yeah.
Yeah. I like that. How do you, One question that came up this morning, we kind of previewed this conversation on Clubhouse this morning, and one question that came up was, how do you even come up with what the fee should be? And that, there's always this discussion, how to
Yeah.
whether it's a percentage or whether it's a lump sum. How do I? We have a number of people in our community that have started firms since COVID. So in the last 2.5 years. So whether I'm a new firm or maybe I'm moving up to larger projects or something like that, do you have any advice on, is that worth? How do I figure out if that's worth 10% or 10,000 or is it worth 5,000 or something like that?
Yeah, interesting. So look, there's academically there's three ways to create your fee number, which I can talk about. But before I talk about that, it's quite interesting to know that we are usually our own worst enemy when it comes to fees, because we have already preconditioned ourselves to what people are willing to spend. But if you look at architecture generally across the board, not just in your own niche, your own sector, but typically fees range wildly. Some people can charge millions of pounds or dollars for a project. Other people might do the same project and be in the hundreds of thousands. So the range is huge. And the reason for this is because fees are just made up numbers, essentially. You do get to kind of choose what you want to choose, but you have to be able to justify it. You have to be able to demonstrate the value you add. And it's when you fail to demonstrate that value add, which is when your fees suffer. But anyway, with that said, three ways to do it. First of all, the old traditional method of break this thing up into smaller chunks and put some timeframes to it. So traditionally, you might take the work stages concept through to contract admin, and you might assign some timeframes to it. Now, people say, well, how much time do I put to it? Hopefully, you've got some experience either working in a previous practice, or if you're just starting out in your own practice, you might know somebody with some experience that can give you some ideas of how long this might take. You obviously want to document this and keep a separate calculation every time you do it. So you create a database of information. But essentially, you break it up into sections, put some time to each section. Don't forget to add, a contingency or an allowance, things you would have forgot about, things you wouldn't have remembered to do or don't know yet that might happen. You've got to add your overhead and profit and everything like that. But that's one way of doing it. The second way is looking at precedents. What have you done in the past? What was the fee like? Did you make money? Did you not make money? Where does it need to be? And then the third method is quite controversial. So I'm going to give you a disclaimer before saying this. Back in the 1970s, in places like the United States, in the UK is a bit more recent. In Canada, they still publish fee scales. So there are these things called indicative fee scales that are floating around on the internet. Places like South Africa and Germany still actually have fee scales, and I think it's Vancouver, British Columbia rather, over in Canada still has fee scales. So the third method of judging your estimated fee is to take one of these charts and see how you compare to that chart that used to be published, used to exist. Now, the caveat is you cannot use, if these are abolished charts, like if you're practicing in the United States, they were abolished in the 1970s, you are not allowed to use these charts in any discussions, in any negotiations. In fact, you should never even mention them to a client because they were abolished, because they were deemed to be illegal. So we need to recognize the limits of their use. But at the same time, I think as an in-house check, that can be your third angle, if you like. So the first one is cost-based, the time-based approach, the more mathematical approach. Second one is precedence. Third one is what the fee scales say. And then when you look at all those, you probably got three different numbers there. And then you can look at them and kind of make an educated guess on where you should be.
Is there, when you make those initial calculations, or use those three methodologies, and you come up with those three different numbers, how do you So when I first started my firm, I did that, and I came up with a maybe an hourly rate that becomes the basis. I may not be putting together an hourly fee, but that's got to be the basis of
Mhm.
how I figure out what I'm going to charge. I did that year one, but now I'm in year 2 or 3. Prices of things are going up. What's the best way to raise those fees? Maybe if I have repeat clients, but maybe it's just in the marketplace. Is there a good way? I know you talk about, and this is probably throwing too much in. It's probably just confusing some issues here, but I know you talk about emotional connections with your clients, proposal to your clients. Does that become a key to being able to raise our fees and maybe raise the perceived value of what we do?
Yeah, good question. So you've got to categorize your clients in 2 categories here. One is existing clients and the other is new clients. You're going to treat them differently. The reason is existing clients are going to expect.
They have a frame of reference.
Yeah, well, they're going to expect you. If anything, they're looking for your fees to go down. They're like, I've given you all this work. Shouldn't you be throwing me a freebie now and again? And you're thinking, I've thrown you enough freebies on every project we worked on. It's time to raise the fees. But you'll see the same behavior in your own behavior. For example, if you frequent a coffee shop every day or you frequent a local bar, you kind of feel like after going there 7 days in a row, surely they can just throw me a free coffee or something. And a lot of coffee shops would do that. They'll have that token where you stab every coffee you get, and by the 10th one is free. So this is the funny thing. If it's an existing client, a repeat client, then they're actually going to expect you to give them some sort of freebie, some benefits. So what we need to do is a strategy called pacing and leading. Okay. If we simply put the price up, they're going to get annoyed, right? Imagine the scenario. You go to your coffee shop, you give them your money every day. All of a sudden you get there, your regular coffee that you've been having every day for the last year has gone up in price. It's not the money. It's that kind of, where's my reward for being a valued customer sort of thing. So if you have clients that have come back to you time and time again, and you simply put your prices up, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. And it depends how much you're putting them up by. So as an example, if you were putting them up by the cost of living, and you can frame it in that way, then theoretically, you might have an argument there. You might be able to have a friendly discussion. But if you're trying to get them up more because you feel like, I haven't raised my fees in 5 years, it's time we do it. We're taking it up a big chunk. Then the preferred method would be to pace and lead. And pace and lead requires offering the client what they currently have at the price they currently have it, and encourage them through the options to want to spend more. Okay. So as an example, if I were the coffee shop owner, I might try and partner that coffee with something in an effort to get their spend up. So in this situation, I might say something like, I don't know, you can get a pastry with that. And if you buy the coffee and the pastry together, it's actually discounted slightly. So the coffee might be $5, the pastry might be $3, but you don't pay $8, you pay $6 or something if you buy them both together. Failing that, you would have to change the size of the coffee so that what they currently have is no longer sort of available. But that's very dangerous because you can upset people with that. So pacing and leading is preferred. If that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. When I see, different reactions to the idea of bringing emotion into the process, but there are studies out there that talk about the fact that people will be willing to pay as much as it's either 200 or 400% more if they can make an emotional connection to a certain product or service or something like that. So when we think about bringing emotion into your proposals or into the proposal process, what does that mean in the world of architecture? How do you get that into your proposals?
Yeah, so the way you address the emotional criteria is by not necessarily selling a design service. This sounds like a stupid thing to say, But essentially what we're doing is we're solving a problem. Now, we're going to design something down the road. We'll design something for you, but that's not the main issue. What we're doing is aligning ourselves as somebody that can solve a problem for you. So once again, if I'm working with a commercial client, what is the problem? The problem is, how can we help them make more money? If they weren't making money, they wouldn't do the development. They're only doing it to make money. So if we can solve that problem, our fees may become negligible to them if we can help them make more money. If we can't solve that problem, if we can't help them make money, then our fees become a problem because it's a cost to the project. So this is how we would address the emotional side of clients. So then the question, the $1 million question, well, how do we help them make money? How do we do that? But there's many different ways depending on the client type and so forth to do that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's again, I think I'm going to go back to mindset, right? Yes, of course you're designing something. Of course you're providing design services, but what's the result of what you do? And it's, a lot of architects, I think, like to talk about the value of an architect or the value of architecture. Well, how do we define that? How do we prove that? And then start to attach it, like you say, to their actual, to their goals and the things that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
When we're thinking about, where we are right now in terms of the economy, it's been a roller coaster, obviously, the last 2.5, 3 years. There are people, technically, we may be in a recession now. I think the more useful conversation in this context is the direction that the economy is headed going to impact the individual practices represented in the audience here in some way, which it certainly will. There's always ebb and flow to the economy. Is there a way in what you do with your clients and everything that you're educating us on and in your work, is there a way to look at the pricing strategies and everything else in preparation for a downturn or a slowdown in the economy?
Good question. I'm not sure how to answer that one. So is there a way to look at the pricing strategy in predicting that there's going to be a downturn or already is a downturn in the economy?
Yeah, or even, what happens when things start to slow down? What do we need to do in terms of the proposals that we're putting together, in terms of the strategy? Do we need to reduce our costs? Do we need to or reduce our fee? Do we need to, do we need to throw the pastry in with the coffee? What happens when things start to slow down?
It's a good question. Obviously, for the last couple of years since COVID had a for most of our clients had a very good impact on the design industry.
Right.
So hopefully that good impact would allow some people to perhaps weather a storm if a storm comes this way. And I hate to sound repetitive, but I think if you truly understand the problem that you're solving for your client, then you're going to be one of the better design service providers. And so you're naturally going to probably have a backlog of work and repeat clients and so forth who are going to want to continue work with you. Will it slow down? Possibly, I don't know. But if you have been able to solve their real problem, then you're probably going to be doing okay. If you haven't, then I think, and obviously I'm biased when I say this, but I think it would really help to actually take some time out to learn more about value-based pricing, to learn more about the game of pricing, because it is a game. There is no right fee necessarily. There isn't a fee we should all be looking for. So to understand how it works, understand how the psychology of pricing works, and it will give you a lot more confidence than in the prices that you are offering your clients.
What's the best way for somebody that needs to understand the game better? Where do they start?
Yeah, well, look, obviously I'm biased on this. I spent over a decade now training architects, interior designers, and landscape architects on how to do this. So you can always reach out to us at Blue Turtle Consulting. We'd be happy to work with you to help you on that process. But otherwise, if you don't, if you're not ready for that yet, maybe you're still at a very preliminary stage, then there's a ton of books available. Depending on pricing, isn't just one answer. It's a culture, it's an understanding, it's a philosophy. So I wouldn't recommend just reading one book. I would recommend reading a ton of books. But if you wanted a book to start with, I think Priceless, The Myth of Fair Value would be a good place to perhaps get started. Read something like that.
I think I have that book. I must have bought it because did you say before to buy it? I must have done that.
Maybe.
But I have it. I have it. It's read.
Excellent. Have you read it? You've read it?
I read the first third of it. Yeah, it was really great. I thought it was pretty good. And then I got distracted and forgot about the book. But now that you mention it, I will find it.
I think that book does a great job of giving you the research and explaining how this is just a game. If you're getting paid $100 an hour or $500 an hour, it's because you don't understand the rules of the game. And so that kind of shows you in a very matter-of-fact way how the game, in an abstract sort of experimental world, how it actually works. And you'll learn about all sorts of things. But if you don't have time, it is a big book. It's about this thick. It's like War and Peace. So if you don't have time to do that, obviously this is something we specialize in. We specialize in training architects and design professionals specifically. And we have a registered architect on our team. She is actually the brains behind our operation. Alexandra is the one it helped us start the consulting firm. And so we have that opportunity to talk to you in your language. We have the opportunity to give you examples of real projects, not the theory. This is what a pre-designed service could be like, but we can actually give you a pre-designed service and say, this is it. These are the deliverables. Let's chat about it. How does that make you feel? Or even with post-design, we can talk to you about different levels, whether it be LEED, BREEAM, WELL, Biophilic, Green Star, Passive House, all these things. So if you want to save time, get to the meat of it all, then we can definitely help you do that. Otherwise, go out and read a ton of those different books, which are all very good.
So Chad is asking about the name of the book, and I will type it here in a minute. It's Priceless, The Myth of Fair Value by William Poundstone.
Correct. Yeah.
And I'll put that in the captions here in just a minute. Well, Manuel's asking, are there other books that you would recommend?
Yeah, we've actually done a top 10 list of business books for architects, and I'm trying to think what else we have on the list. If you gave me a little bit of time, I might be able to just bring it up and give you some of our recommendations. Just 1 second. Maybe you can talk amongst yourselves while I'm doing this.
Yeah, this while Ian is looking, the website for Blue Turtle Consulting is blueturtlemc.com. Mark has just dropped that into the comments. Thank you, Mark, for that. And he's also dropped the Amazon link for Priceless there. So bottom left of your screen right now is that title.
Excellent.
Maybe we could read that for our book club, Jeff.
We'll do Priceless and War and Peace in the same month.
Okay, it's not as long. I don't remember it being that long, but I do remember the beginning.
You only made it a third of the way through.
Yeah, that's because it was a physical book, and you know how I can't read physical books because I fall asleep, and it's harder to read a physical book. But when he was talking about the numbers, that if someone tells a client a number, that's the number that sticks in their head, and that's it. So you have to be really careful about throwing out the initial number of whatever it is, whether it's the cost.
Anchoring and adjustment. Yeah,
exactly.
It's known as anchoring and adjustment. It's why you should always make the first offer in any negotiation. So if you do work for an organization, you're going for a pay raise or something, if you have a good idea of what you are asking for, then you should be the one to make the first offer, because all subsequent offers will be judged based on the first number that comes into the equation. Okay?
Yeah.
I'll give you a couple of other books I would highly recommend of our top 10 list. Predictably Irrational. I'm sure most people have already read that. That's a fantastic book by Dan Ariely. I don't think you can go wrong reading any business books about pricing, to be honest. The more you learn about it, the better. Nudge is a fantastic book. It's called Nudge, Improving Decisions About Health, Wealth, and Happiness. Yeah, so I won't give you too many because people get overloaded. But essentially, those are 3 great books to get started with. And somebody's posted our link.
Yeah, Mark found the link. There you go.
Thank you, Mark.
So you can go find go to that link that Mark has just posted, and you can find the top 10 list. That'll be very helpful. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot to dig into here. I mean, you help. I mean, you're focused on small and medium-sized design firms, and I know that there are several different ways that you help. What are you doing with your clients, and how are you helping them?
Well, there's 3 ways we typically work with our clients. Okay, they're all based on the same foundation. Okay, so there's a foundation of knowledge which we want to share with you, so you understand what we're doing. So the 3 ways we work, we do exactly what we are going to teach you to do if you work with us. We offer options. Okay. So the first way we can work together is what we call the self-paced version. So we can give you all the material and you can take it at your leisure, and you can get back to us if you have questions, comments, concerns, or need help. The second way we work together is just one-on-one coaching. So we'll work through the material with you. And we'll have Zoom calls, which are one-on-one or one-on-two, depending on how many people in your practice need to be involved in the process. And the third way is what we call the done for you package. We will actually create a value-based proposal for your firm. To do this, it usually takes us about 3 weeks. We'll sit down with you, we'll interview you, we'll find out your likes, dislikes, find out about your branding. We'll then create a full report for you, showing you our findings, what we think you're currently doing and how you're doing it, perhaps things you're doing but you're not communicating to your clients and how you could communicate it. And then we'll also show you things you aren't offering your clients, but you could be offering if they were going to pay you a free premium fee for that service. We'll also show you how to present it, and we'll give you not just one way of presenting it, we'll give you 5 different ways to present the information. And we'll also diagram out your current proposal, and we will show you how we would structure your proposal. We'll put that in a report, we'll send it to you, and then we'll go through the report with you, and we'll find out what you like about what we've designed for you, what you don't like, and then we'll take that information and create your template, and we'll have another meeting with you, present it to you, and then do the fine-tuning for it. So it usually takes around 3 weeks. Can take a little bit longer, depending on how many questions you have. But yeah, so that's the done for you package.
So there you go. There's a 3-tiered proposal for you, for everybody. Yeah, I love that, and I know. Again, I know there are a lot of folks in this community that are familiar with you, maybe have worked with you. They're fans of yours. If you're not familiar, if this is your first introduction to Ian Motley, go to blueturtlemc.com to learn more. That's their web address there. It's in the bottom left of your screen right now. Ian has made the rounds at conferences and other places. There are like we talked about at the very beginning of the conversation today. It's been on the EntreArchitect podcast twice. I think episodes 252 and 428 off the top of my head. Both of those are worth the listen. That's the fascinating thing. You know, the more conversations you hear with someone, the more nuance you can pull out, and the more you can learn. So check those conversations out between Ian and Mark as well. Ian, thank you very much for this conversation. We really appreciate you, and appreciate you being here and sharing all of this information with us and with our audience. To everybody out there, thank you for being here. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for the conversation in the sidebar there. Reach out to Ian. consume the information that's already out there and take advantage of one of the tiers of the proposal that he just laid out. I think that one of the best things that we can do in anticipation of a downturn is work on tightening our business up, work on getting better at our business, and obviously our pricing strategies, our fee strategies would be a big component of that. So I encourage everybody to think about that. So thanks to all of you out there. Thanks to Ian. As we look towards next week on Context and Clarity Live, we will talk with Mark Zweig, the founder of the Zweig Group. Many of you are familiar with Zweig Group. So we'll get more into firm management, I'm sure, in our conversation next week. Tomorrow, we'll wrap up our week of context and clarity conversations by asking all of you, how do you come up with your fee? What's your method? What's the method to your madness? Are you throwing things in a cauldron and stirring it up and chanting, or you have some scientific method? What are you doing? So that's what we'll talk about tomorrow. We'll open the Zoom room to anybody that wants to join us. Of course, you can still participate through the comments like you do every day. But Chad says he throws darts at the wall. Fair enough. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Looking forward to that conversation. Of course, we'll be on Clubhouse tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern with the same question. How do you come up with your fee? So again, Ian, thanks a lot.
Really Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you. Thanks, everybody. Please take care of yourselves. Be well, stay safe. Take a little bit of time to breathe, relax, find some way to rejuvenate. We do this every day. It's a long game. So thanks for playing it with us. Thanks for going along on the ride. Take care of yourself, pace yourself, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.